You've got a hot end and it's clogged. You suspect it might be clogged and you want to understand how it works and how to unclog it. What are the do's and what are the don'ts so that you don't get into trouble and you can rescue your hot end. In my hand I have the E3D V6 hot end. In today's video I'm going to go over and cover everything you need to know about the 3D printer hot end. Hello everybody, my name is Ali and welcome to my channel. I previously just had this hot end clogged and I went through this whole process, and this is why I am making this video to walk you through what you need to know about how to unclog the hot end, what you need to do, and everything about what you need to know about this topic. In this video we're going to cover what causes a hot end to clog. Also we're going to talk about the symptoms of a clogged hot end. Then we're going to take a look at basic troubleshooting. We're also going to cover the cold pull method and what to do when the cold pull method fails, full disassembly of the hot end, preventing future clogs, and also when it's time to replace the nozzle. So let's start by going over what is a hot end. Here in front of me I have the E3D V6 hot end, and if we go over it we can see this white thing in the top. This is called a BTFE tube. This thing is used to actually just feed the plastic filament. So when you have the plastic filament, it will go inside this and then through this tube and down to the nozzle. And then this larger piece, this is the heat sink. The heat sink's job is actually to dissipate heat. It has all these fins so that more air can circulate through and take some of the hot air out and exchange it with some cold air. So basically you would have a fan that would blow on the heat sinks, dissipating the heat of the heat sink. Between the heat block and the heat sinks you have a heat breaker. What it does is, in the name, it breaks the heat. So basically we have a cold end or a cold side and a hot side. In the bottom we have the heat block, and then down here we usually have the nozzle. Here we have the heat breaker out from the heat sinks so you guys can see it. As you can see, this is the heat breaker and it breaks the heat so that we have the hot side and the cold side, the hot end and the cold end. And then the heatsink will sit on this heat breaker and it will dissipate the heat from the heat breaker. And finally we have the nozzle. The nozzle is the one that sits in the bottom of the heat block. It will usually be screwed into this while the hot end is hot, and the plastic filament will be extruded through the nozzle depending on the size of it. This is a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. So yeah, now that we have looked at the hot end and we know how it works, let's look at what causes the hot end to clog. The first one is just printing too cold. So once I thought I had a clogged hot end. In reality, I had the setting set for a too cold hot end. What I mean by that is, in the setting for when I'm printing and extruding the filament for ABS, instead of having hot end set at 250 degrees, I had it set to 150 degrees. So I oversaw the settings and I by mistake set it to a colder hot end. This led to the extrusion being impossible because the plastic wasn't melted and the stepper motor couldn't push the plastic through the nozzle. So always check if you have the hot end set at the correct settings. You might be running a colder setting for the materials you are trying to extrude. Maybe it was set for PLA and you are now using ABS. Check your settings and see if they are set correctly before moving on. Another reason why a clogged hot end is caused could be bad filament. Maybe it's old filament, maybe there is something wrong. The filament could be dirty and it could be clogging the hot end, but it might just be bad filament. If you're having trouble with a certain filament, try something else, try something fresh, see if that works out. Another thing that is really common for clogging hot end is debris. If you get debris or any dust inside your nozzle, you are asking for trouble. Always check your filament, make sure they are clean. If not, put something that can dry them before it goes into the nozzle. So I always have something before the nozzle that would wipe the filament to make sure nothing enters the nozzle, because over time when debris enter the nozzle, it will collect inside and then it will form a clog, and that's something we don't want. We want to prevent any debris from going into the nozzle, preventing it from clogging up so that we don't have any problems in the future. And finally, the last thing that is very common for a clogged nozzle is a failed nozzle or a failed hot end. Inside this hot end, as we looked at it before, you could see that the PTFE tube was seated right before the heater block. If there is a gap between those two, the hot end could be clogged because plastic filament will collect between those two and form a clog. The same thing goes between the heater block and the nozzle. All of these should be seated right on each other to make sure to avoid collecting anything. If that happens, then you need to disassemble the hot end and clean it and unclog it and then reassemble it again. Great. So you have a hot end that you're suspecting might be clogged. You want to know if it's clogged or not. What are some of the symptoms? One is grinding noises. You might hear some grinding noises. Usually with the grinding noises, no filament comes out or you have under extrusion. And when you hear that, that's because the stepper motors that's on your 3D printer is trying to extrude the filament but is failing. That's because you have a clogged hot end and it's not able to push that filament out. A grinding noise is not always the reason for a clogged hot end. It might be that it's not gripping the filament correctly or that it's pushing maybe too much filament out, but it can be one of the symptoms of a clogged hot end. Another symptom is that filament is not coming out of the hot end, or maybe it's coming out but it's inconsistent. So if you have inconsistency in the filament being extruded or the filament isn't coming out at all, you could have a clogged hot end. Also, you might hear some clicking and the stepper motor might be also doing some skipping, and you might be hearing some grinding noises, you might not. If the stepper motor is skipping, it might be under extruding. You also might hear the term air printing, and that's because when there is no extrusion, the printer is still going, but it's like printing in the air with nothing coming out. So yeah, basically symptoms of a clogged nozzle could be grinding noises, under extrusion, and air printing or no filament coming out. Or of course, filament coming out but inconsistent. Now you know your hot end is clogged and you want to troubleshoot. The way I would do is I want to check if it is partially clogged or if it's fully clogged. So what I would do is I would set my hot end to a higher temperature and then I would try manually feeding the filament through the nozzle. So if I have the filament here, I will try to manually push it and force it inside the hot end. Now I won't push too hard, but I would push hard enough, and I want to look at the hot end and see if anything is coming out the other side of the nozzle. If I can manage to get something through, it might be partially blocked. If nothing comes up, it's fully blocked. Then I might try to do a cold pull on the hot end to get rid of any debris or anything, or try to unclog it. When troubleshooting, I would also check for other parts of the printer. I would check if the fan is on or not, because if the fan isn't on, I might have a different kind of problem in my nozzle. It might be that no air was pushed through the heatsink and the heatsink got too hot and that plastic might have melted inside the heatsink. That would mean taking the hot end off the printer and trying to disassemble it and clean it manually. Another thing I would try to do when troubleshooting is to check if the stepper motor that is on the extruder, that it is working. If we have a failed stepper motor, it might not be pushing any filament because the stepper motor just failed. Okay, so you know that your hot end is clogged. You went through troubleshooting the hot end and you know it's not because of the fan not working or something. and you want to try to unclog it. Sometimes debris come into the hot end and blocks the hot end. And what we could do to pull those debris out is to do the cold pull. Now what you want to do to attempt to do the cold pull is to heat your hot end to printing temp. Then you want to insert the filament inside the hot end. Now this will be on the printer, of course. You want to insert your filament into the hot end and you want to wait for it to melt inside the hot end. After that, you want to lower the temperature of the hot end. So if I have ABS, I would lower it from 250 to 160 degrees, something like that, around that. So it's slightly cold. The filament will be slightly melted or softer, I would say, not melted but softer. You will wait a little bit for the filament to soften or to cool down and soften instead of being melted. And then what you want to do is you want to actually just pull it out. And when you're pulling it out, you should see a blob at the end of the filament and some debris. If you see that, that's a success. That means you pulled out the debris from the nozzle and you have unclogged your nozzle. So what do we do when the cold pull fails? So if the cold pull fails, there is no way around it. We have to remove the hot end from the 3D printer and disassemble it. When you remove the nozzle, the first thing you need to do is remove everything around the nozzle. There will be different parts and you need to consult your printer's manual to actually disassemble the printer and remove it. Usually on DIY printers, it's easier to actually remove the nozzle. On some more advanced printers, it could be harder, but the process would be almost the same on all printers. You would start by removing fans that are sitting on the hot end assembly. Then you would remove all the plastic parts around the hot end, and then you want to pull out the hot ends after you remove the heating element and any sensors that are on board. When you've extracted the hot end from the printer and you have it in your hand, you can start by inspecting it. Now before you go and you remove your hot end, always make sure that you remove the nozzle that's on the bottom of your hot end, that's on the heater block. You want to remove that while the hot end is hot. So before doing anything, start by removing the nozzle. Heat up your hot end to the printing temperature and then use a wrench or something to unscrew the hot end out. If you do it while it is cold, you will crack and break your nozzle, and then you would need to order a new nozzle, or you would need to actually replace the heater block because the nozzle is stuck now and you can't get it out. Now to clean the hot end, you need to disassemble the hot end itself. And to do that, I would try to start by removing the heat breaker from the heatsink. I would do that by actually grabbing a hold of the heatsink and then unscrewing the heat block and see if I can get the heat break unscrewed from the heatsink. And to do that, you would need a heat gun. You would need a heat gun to heat the hot end to get it hot, so that the plastic inside the hot end is soft and you can get it removed. For me, I didn't have a heat gun, so I used a butane torch. I would not recommend doing that. It can be dangerous. Because I didn't have any heat gun, I just used what I had at the time. After removing the heat break, you can unclog the heat break. You might have some plastic on the cold side or whatever it is. I would use a drill to drill out any plastic from the heater breaker and try to remove anything that is clogging it. Similarly with the heatsink, what you want to do is you want to try to remove the PTFE tube from the heatsink. And to do that, you have to heat your heatsink up with a heat gun and then pry it out and see if you can get it out. Try to look inside of it from below. If there is any blob that has formed in the bottom, it will be hard to actually pry it off. You would need to apply a decent amount of heat to make sure the plastic softens so you can pull it out. Once you pull the PTFE tube out, I would recommend to replace it with a new PTFE tube. I would check the heatsink. If there's anything stuck inside the heatsink, you need to clean it out. After that, you would have a completely cleaned and unclogged hot end because you cleaned everything. The last remaining thing would be the nozzle. The nozzle should just be replaced. Don't bother cleaning it. You could try, but just replace it. It doesn't cost that much. Replace the nozzle and you would have a fully working Hotend that is unclogged. Just everything in reverse, assembling it back to the printer and adding all the plastic parts and then adding the fans, and that's it. You should be good to go. Okay, great. So now you have unclogged your Hotend and it's all and ready, but you need to prevent your Hotend from getting clogged in the future. What you need to do is you need first of all to buy filament from some good brand, something you can trust, something others have recommended, something that doesn't have any imperfection inside the filament. Always use filament from known and good brand. Another thing is, like I talked about before, use a dust filter. A dust filter is very good to use. Have a dust filter before anything goes into the nozzle that can dust any debris, anything off that filament before it goes into the nozzle. That way you can prevent anything from getting stuck into the nozzle and causing it to clog up. I would also suggest that you do a regular Hotend maintenance. Just make sure to do a cold pull once in a while to make sure no debris get stuck inside the printer, and once in a while just change out the nozzle with a new fresh one. And the last thing, please store your filament properly. Store them in some place that is dry and dark to prevent anything happening to them and them causing the Hotend to clog in the future. So when is it time to replace the nozzle? For me, I think signs of a worn nozzle would be if it constantly gets clogged. If it is constantly getting clogged, you just need to replace it. And why not just replace it? Like once in a while, just replace the nozzle with a fresh one. It doesn't cost that much, so I would say like once every year, once every 6 months, just go ahead and give it a fresh nozzle. This will just prevent getting clogged in the future. And a bonus tip, always have some spare nozzle laying around. You never know when you need one and when you need to replace it. So keep some spare nozzle nearby so that if your nozzle gets worn out, you can just replace it. So again, if you have a clogged nozzle, you need to identify what is clogged in the nozzle, where the clog is. Either do a cold pull to pull it out and get it clean, or have it taken apart and then inspect your Hotend and make sure you can clean it all up and assemble it back and make it print. Make sure you prevent any clogs from happening in the future and understanding if it is not clogged and if there are other parts of the printer that has problems. Those 3D printers are very precise machines and everything needs to function in a certain way and have it make these awesome prints. I love my 3D printers and I love giving them some care. I know I haven't done that in a while for my 3D printer. That will change. I will be giving them some extra love and making sure they are well maintained. I would suggest you do the same with your 3D printer. Maintaining it is something very important to have it last for you a long time. I don't know if I missed anything. If you have a 3D printer and there is other things that I didn't mention in this video right now, just comment below. Tell me what I missed. If you have any questions, also comment below. Anything or any tips that you have, please leave them and I will read them and I will respond to them. I have some bigger projects coming up, so please subscribe to the channel to not miss them out. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one.